The champagne flute felt cold against my fingers as I stood on the rooftop terrace of the Beaumont Hotel in downtown Charleston, watching the sun bleed orange across the harbor. 26 floors below, the cobblestone streets of the historic district glowed under vintage lamplight. My sister-in-law Vanessa had rented out the entire rooftop for my husband Marcus's 35th birthday, and the guest list read like a page torn out of Southern Living magazine. Senators, tech executives, old money heirs who still pronounced the word house with 3 syllables. I smoothed down the front of my emerald dress and pressed my palm gently against the small curve of my stomach. 12 weeks. Twins. I had the ultrasound photos tucked inside my clutch, printed twice because Marcus had lost the first set somewhere between his office and the car. I am Rebecca Ashford, and I am a senior forensic data analyst for a federal white-collar crimes task force. I spend my days pulling apart spreadsheets that other people spent years building to hide money. I can trace a dollar through 17 shell corporations and find it napping in the Cayman Islands by lunchtime. I mention this because it matters. It matters more than I understood that night. Marcus came up behind me and kissed my temple, his breath sweet with bourbon. He asked if I was ready. I nodded. We had agreed to announce the pregnancy together at the toast, surrounded by his family, the way his mother Eleanor had demanded every major life milestone be handled. Eleanor Ashford was 71 years old, silver-haired, and dressed that evening in a cream Chanel suit that probably cost more than my first car. She controlled the Ashford shipping fortune the way other grandmothers controlled Thanksgiving recipes, with an iron fist and the absolute conviction that her judgment was the only one that mattered. The truth I had been too naive to accept until that night was this. Eleanor had never liked me. I came from a middle-class family in Ohio. My father was a high school principal. My mother taught piano lessons in our living room. I had earned my position at the bureau through scholarships and 18-hour days, not through the right bloodline. Eleanor tolerated me because Marcus had married me before she could intervene, and because I had the decency to be photogenic at charity galas. But she had spent 7 years waiting for me to make one wrong move. Marcus tapped his glass with a small silver spoon. The crowd quieted. He thanked everyone for coming, thanked his mother for organizing, thanked Vanessa for her taste. Then he looked at me and his eyes went soft. He said he had an announcement. He said we had an announcement. My heart was beating so fast, I could feel it in my throat. He took my hand and told the room that we were expecting twins in the spring, a little boy and a little girl. The Ashford name would continue. The silence that followed was not the silence of surprise. It was the silence of a room waiting for something it had been promised. Eleanor Ashford set down her wineglass with a click that sounded like a pistol being cocked. She stepped forward into the circle of light beneath the outdoor chandelier. She smiled at me with the particular warmth of a knife being unsheathed. "Rebecca, darling," she said, loud enough for every guest to hear, "why don't you tell everyone the truth?" I felt Marcus's hand loosen in mine. "The truth about what, Eleanor?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "About how you're not actually pregnant." She tilted her head. "About how this whole charade is a desperate attempt to lock in your claim on Marcus's inheritance before the trust matures next month." A murmur rolled through the crowd like a wave. I stared at her. I could not speak. Eleanor turned to the guests as if addressing a jury. She explained that Marcus was set to inherit $14 million from his grandfather's trust on his 35th birthday. Tonight, that I had known this, that I had been faking pregnancy symptoms for weeks, that she had a private investigator who had been following me to doctor appointments and had found no medical records, that the ultrasound photos I carried around were fabricated. None of it was true. Every word was a lie, so carefully constructed, I could see the seams where she had stitched each falsehood to the next. "I have the ultrasound right here," I said, fumbling for my clutch. "Dr. Patel at Roper Hospital. You can call her office tomorrow." Vanessa stepped forward then, my sister-in-law, the woman who had been at my bridal shower, who had held my hair back when I threw up at her bachelorette weekend, who had told me 2 months ago that she thought of me as her real sister. She held up her phone and showed the crowd a screenshot of what she claimed was a medical records database showing no pregnancy for me. It's forged, she said. We've had it analyzed. I looked at Marcus. I waited for him to speak, to defend me, to say that he had felt the flutter of movement with his own hand the week before, that he had been to the first appointment with me, that he had cried when he heard the heartbeats. He said nothing. He stared at the floor, as if the pattern in the travertine tile might save him. Eleanor walked toward me. She spoke quietly now, the way a predator speaks when the herd has already scattered. I'm going to do something you won't thank me for, Rebecca. But this family deserves the truth. And you deserve to be exposed in front of everyone who ever believed your little act. She reached for my dress. I stepped back. I was near the waist-high glass barrier that ran around the rooftop terrace, the one with the ornamental wrought iron curlicues on top that added another foot of height but were not load-bearing. I stepped back again and felt the barrier against my hip. Eleanor, stop. I put up my hands. I don't know what you think you know, but please. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was shockingly strong for a woman her age. She yanked me toward her and I stumbled on my heels. For a moment I thought she only wanted to drag me toward the guests, to humiliate me in front of them, to tear at my dress, and show the crowd my non-existent swelling belly. Then she twisted her body and pushed. I went over the railing backward. The wrought iron scraped my spine through the silk of my dress. My clutch fell out of my hand, and I remember watching the ultrasound photos flutter out of it like two small white birds as the night air swallowed me. I heard someone scream. I heard Marcus shout my name. Too late. Always too late. I did not fall 26 stories. I landed on the roof of the pool cabana on the terrace level below, a structure only 8 feet down, reinforced with a striped canvas awning stretched taut over a wooden frame. The awning broke most of my fall. The wooden frame broke my left arm and 3 ribs. My head struck the edge of a wrought iron planter, and I lost consciousness for what the paramedics later told me was approximately 11 minutes. Marcus found me. He called 911. He sat with me and whispered my name while the ambulance climbed the hill from Meeting Street. I remember none of it. I was told later by a waiter who had witnessed the whole thing, a young man named Jamal who would become one of the most important people in the story I had not yet realized I was living. I woke up in the trauma bay at the Medical University of South Carolina. The lights were the color of winter. A nurse named Diane was taping a pulse oximeter to my finger. I tried to speak and she told me not to. I tried to sit up and she told me absolutely not. She told me I was safe. She told me my babies were safe, both heartbeats strong. She pointed to the fetal monitor and I heard them. 2 tiny drums beating inside me, out of rhythm with each other. Perfect. I cried so hard the nurse called for the doctor. Marcus came in. His eyes were red. He reached for my hand. I pulled mine back. "Where is your mother?" I said. "She's in the waiting room. With Vanessa." "Rebecca, I am so sorry. I didn't know what to do. It all happened so fast. Get her out of this hospital." He flinched as if I had struck him. A detective walked in before he could respond. Her name was Detective Moreno. She was in her 40s, Puerto Rican, with tired eyes and a gentle manner. She asked if I felt able to give a statement. I said yes. I asked her to make sure that no one from the Ashford family except Marcus was allowed past the nurse's station. Detective Moreno looked at a chart, looked back at me, and said she would handle it personally. I told her everything. The toast, the accusation, the hand on my wrist, the push. I told her about the $14 million trust fund. I told her who I was and what I did for a living. Detective Moreno wrote everything down and then put her pen on top of her notebook and looked at me for a long moment. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, "your mother-in-law is currently in the family waiting area, telling anyone who will listen that you threw yourself off that terrace to fake an attempted murder." I closed my eyes. Of course she was. "She is also refusing to leave the hospital until she speaks to you personally, and she has a lawyer with her." I opened my eyes. "Detective, there is something you need to know. 6 weeks ago, after an incident at Thanksgiving where my mother-in-law threatened me, in a way that my husband did not find concerning, I installed a small recording device in the brooch I wore tonight. It's pinned to the dress they cut off me in the ambulance. The dress should be in a plastic bag with my other belongings. The device uploads audio to a cloud server every 60 seconds. Everything that happened on that rooftop was recorded and time-stamped and cannot be edited. Detective Moreno did not smile, but something in her face changed. She asked where the dress was. A nurse retrieved the bag. The brooch was intact. Detective Moreno took it as evidence. Marcus was staring at me. You recorded my family? I looked at him, and I saw him for the first time. Not as my husband. As an exhibit. A man who had been trained from birth to believe that his family's reputation was more important than any single human inside it, including his own wife, including his unborn children. A weak man, a dangerous man because of his weakness. Marcus, I said, I need you to leave the room. I'm going to have my attorney contact you about the divorce in the morning. Rebecca, please. Get out. He got out. Here is where the story should have ended. A wife in a hospital bed, a villain in handcuffs, a coward of a husband slinking home. But Eleanor Ashford was not a woman who accepted defeat. Eleanor Ashford was a woman who had spent 50 years learning how to rewrite reality until it matched her preferred version. At 11:47 that night, while I was still in the trauma bay waiting to be moved to a recovery room, my sister-in-law Vanessa pushed past the nurse's station and into my hallway, carrying a manila folder. She was screaming. She was screaming that I had lied to everyone, that she had proof, that the babies were not real and had never been real. Security intercepted her before she could enter my room, but I could hear her voice echoing down the corridor, shrill and theatrical. She's lying. Those aren't Marcus's. That machine is rigged. Check her. Check her right now. Detective Moreno stepped out of my room and closed the door behind her. I later learned that she walked directly up to Vanessa, showed her badge, and informed her that she was interfering with a criminal investigation and that the next word out of her mouth would result in her arrest. Vanessa stopped screaming. Security escorted her from the building. Eleanor was arrested in the waiting room at 12:19 a.m. She was charged with attempted murder, attempted feticide, and assault with a deadly weapon, which is what they call a 26-story building when you push someone off it. Her lawyer argued for bail. The judge took one look at the audio recording that the prosecutor played in the bail hearing and denied bail entirely. The recording was clear. Eleanor's voice, calm and precise, saying, "This family deserves the truth, and you deserve to be exposed." Then my voice asking her to stop. Then the sound of fabric being grabbed. Then my scream. Then the soft, wet sound of my body hitting the cabana roof 8 feet below. Then Eleanor's voice again, still calm, saying to no one in particular, "Well, that's done." The news cycle was brutal for the Ashford family. The kind of brutal that old Charleston money had never quite experienced before. The shipping company's stock dropped 11%. Several board members resigned rather than be associated with Eleanor's name. Vanessa was charged as an accessory after the fact once investigators pulled her phone records and found the text messages between her and Eleanor coordinating the public confrontation. Vanessa had rented the rooftop specifically because the ornamental railing was shorter than code. She had known. Marcus filed for divorce 3 weeks later, not because he wanted to, because his mother's attorneys told him it was the only way to distance the trust fund from the criminal proceedings. He came to my hospital room the day before the papers were served and sat in the visitor chair and cried. He told me he loved me. He told me he had failed me. He told me he would spend the rest of his life making it right. I listened to him without speaking. When he was done, I asked him a single question. "Marcus, when your mother grabbed my wrist on that terrace, what did you think she was going to do?" He looked at his hands. He did not answer. "You thought she was going to push me. You thought it and you did nothing. You did not step forward. You did not shout. You did not pull her away. You stood there and you watched her decide whether your wife and your children lived or died. And you made the calculation that your mother's approval was worth that risk." Rebecca. I am not angry at you, Marcus. I am finished with you. There is a difference. I let him sign the divorce papers. I did not take alimony. I did not take the house in Mount Pleasant, or the condo in Kiowa, or any of the rental properties. I took exactly one thing from my marriage to Marcus Ashford, and it was the 2 human beings growing inside me. The trial was 8 months later. I was 6 months pregnant when I testified. Eleanor's lead attorney was a man named Bennett Caldwell who had gotten 3 murderers acquitted in the past decade. He tried to suggest that the recording had been altered. He tried to suggest that I had orchestrated the whole thing to extort the family. He tried to suggest that my forensic accounting background meant I was capable of sophisticated fraud and therefore should not be trusted. On the stand, I held up the ultrasound photos from that night, the ones Marcus's father had found on the rooftop and kept in his desk drawer as if they were evidence of something he could not yet name. I told the jury that my children had been born on that terrace, born into a family that did not want them, born as survivors before they had drawn a single breath outside me. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found Eleanor Ashford guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 32 years in federal prison. She will be 103 years old when she is eligible for parole. Vanessa was sentenced to 7 years. The Ashford Shipping Company was sold to a competitor for 40 cents on the dollar. Marcus inherited nothing. The trust fund had a morality clause that his grandfather had inserted in 1974, written in plain language. No beneficiary of this trust shall receive distribution if said beneficiary has been complicit, through action or inaction, in the physical harm of a spouse or child. The trustees ruled that Marcus's silence on the rooftop qualified. He received a one-time payment of $50,000, and the rest of the $14 million went to a charitable foundation for survivors of domestic violence. A foundation that, as of last year, I now sit on the board of. My twins were born on a bright March morning, a boy named Samuel after my father, a girl named June because that was my grandmother's name, and because it felt like a promise of warmth. They weigh 19 and 21 pounds respectively now. They have my eyes and, unfortunately, Marcus's exact nose, which I have decided to find charming. I used my portion of our shared assets, the small portion I had accumulated independently before the marriage, to start Ashford Forensic Consulting. I kept the name on purpose. The name is mine now. I built it with my own hands. My firm specializes in tracing financial abuse in high-net-worth domestic situations. We have helped 47 women in the last 3 years recover assets their spouses and in-laws tried to hide from them. We have a waiting list, 6 months long. I do not advertise. The clients find us by whisper. My office sits on the 12th floor of a building on East Bay Street. The windows look out over the same harbor I watched bleed orange the night Eleanor Ashford tried to kill me. My children have a playroom in the corner with a view of the cruise ships. My son Samuel stacks his wooden blocks into impossible towers. My daughter June tears them down and laughs like she has discovered the fundamental joke of the universe. People ask me sometimes if I hate Eleanor. If I lie awake at night thinking about her in her cell, if I imagine her begging for mercy the way she made me beg on that terrace, the honest answer is that I do not think about her often enough to hate her. Hate requires fuel. Hate requires that the other person still have some hold on your life, some shape in your mind. Eleanor is a closed file in my office. She is a chapter in a story I no longer live inside. What I feel instead is closer to gratitude. If Eleanor had not pushed me, I would have lived the rest of my life slowly being erased. I would have raised my children in a house where their grandmother's approval was the currency that purchased their mother's silence. I would have watched my son learn that his father would never protect him because his father had been taught that protection was a form of rebellion. I would have watched my daughter learn to make herself smaller at the dinner table until she was small enough to disappear entirely. Instead, my children are loud. They are loud and they are held and they are never, not once, in their 3 years of life, going to be told that the people who love them are the people they must fear. I want to say something to anyone watching this who is still living inside a family that hurts them. I know what they tell you. I know they tell you that family is forever. I know they tell you that forgiveness is holy. I know they tell you that walking away makes you the bad one. I lived inside that story for 7 years. It almost cost me my life and the lives of my children. A family is not a cage. A family is not a debt. A family is a garden. And sometimes a garden has weeds in it so deep and so tangled that no amount of gentle tending will ever let the flowers grow. Sometimes you have to take a shovel to the whole thing and start over with new soil. That is not a failure. That is farming. I am not the quiet wife who stood on that rooftop in her emerald dress, and tried to announce a piece of good news to people who had already decided she did not deserve joy. I am the woman who fell and did not die. I am the woman who got up. I am the woman who audited a family's soul and found it empty and closed the account. If my story reached you tonight, if any part of it felt familiar, I want you to know one thing. The people who are supposed to protect you do not get to harm you just because of the name on a birth certificate or a marriage license. Your peace is not a luxury. Your peace is the foundation every other good thing in your life will be built on. Guard it like your children's lives depend on it, because one day they might. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you, tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if this helped even one person tonight decide that they deserve better, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Restoration Stories for more journeys like mine. Because the truth is, we are not alone in this. We never were. We just had to find each other.